Sarah stirred in her sleep, rolling over as the soft hum of the baby monitor filled the quiet room. In the nursery down the hall, little Noah slept peacefully, his tiny hands curled into fists against the blanket. The house was still, untouched by anything unusual. Yet, in the dim glow of the nightlight, Whiskers lifted his head from his usual spot near the crib, his ears twitching. Something had changed. His body tensed, eyes locked onto the crib's edge, though nothing seemed out of place. His tail flicked once, twice, then stopped completely. He wasn't just watching, he was calculating. The air felt different, thick with something unseen, something only he could sense. His claws flexed against the soft rug beneath him, his breath slow and steady. Then, suddenly, he moved. In one swift motion, Whiskers leapt onto the crib's railing, his fur bristling as he peered down. His pupils widened, scanning every inch of the sleeping baby's face, the rise and fall of his chest, the tiny fingers twitching in a dream. But it wasn't Noah he was watching. It was something else, something creeping closer. Whiskers' ears flattened. A low, almost inaudible sound vibrated from his throat. His body coiled like a spring, muscles tense, instincts kicking in. He didn't blink. He didn't hesitate. Then, in a flash, he lunged. The silence of the nursery shattered with a loud thud. The crib shook slightly. Noah stirred, but he didn't wake. The sound of tiny, rapid movements filled the room, something scurrying, something desperate. Whiskers landed on the floor with precision, his paws hitting the hardwood as he darted toward the unseen threat. The security camera's red light blinked in the darkness, capturing everything. For a moment, all was still. Then the sound of a single sharp swipe, claws against something small, followed by another thud. The baby let out a soft whimper, but quickly settled, unaware of what had just happened. Whiskers stood motionless beside the crib, his tail fluffed up, his chest rising and falling quickly. He didn't move, didn't chase any further. He had already won. Down the hall, Sarah turned in bed, unaware that her son had just been saved. The house returned to its quiet state, the night resuming as if nothing had happened. But in the morning, everything would change. The morning sunlight streamed through the nursery window as Sarah stretched, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. She had no reason to think anything was wrong. Noah's soft coos came through the baby monitor, a comforting sound that signaled another peaceful night. She smiled, slipping out of bed and making her way down the hall. But the moment she stepped into the nursery, she stopped. Whiskers sat stiffly beside the crib, his body still tense, his eyes locked onto something on the floor. His ears twitched at Sarah's entrance, but he didn't move from his position. Her brow furrowed as she took a step closer, her gaze following his. Then she saw it, a dead rat. Her breath caught in her throat. It wasn't just any rat, it was large, its tail curled unnaturally, its small body frozen in a way that told her it had been stopped mid-motion. Her stomach twisted. Her first instinct was to grab Noah, lifting him into her arms, checking him over even though she knew he was fine. He yawned against her shoulder, blissfully unaware of what had been inches from his crib in the middle of the night. Her eyes darted back to Whiskers, realization settling in. He hadn't just killed the rat, he had protected Noah. The pieces clicked into place. The way he was still guarding the crib, the tension in his posture, the way his fur remained bristled. This wasn't just a cat's natural hunting instinct. This was something more. Heart pounding, Sarah set Noah down in his bassinet and rushed out of the room, calling for David. He appeared moments later, groggy, his expression shifting from confusion to concern as she pointed toward the floor. His eyes widened. "How did that even get in here?" he muttered. Sarah shook her head. "I don't know, but Whiskers, he knew. He must have been watching it, waiting. What if he hadn't— She cut herself off, not wanting to finish the thought. David exhaled slowly, glancing down at their cat, who remained unmoved. "I think we need to check the security footage." Sarah nodded, her pulse quickening. She had always trusted Whiskers, but she had never imagined he would save their son. Whatever had happened last night, she needed to see it for herself. David and Sarah sat in front of their computer, the soft hum of the machine the only sound in the room. Sarah's fingers hovered over the keyboard, her heart pounding in her chest. She had always known their home security system was there for safety, but she had never imagined it would reveal something like this. As David leaned in, his eyes fixed on the screen, they navigated to the footage from the nursery's security camera. The timestamp read 2:42 a.m. They clicked play, the video starting with a quiet, empty room. Noah was sleeping soundly in his crib, his chest rising and falling in the peaceful rhythm of a child at rest. For the first few seconds, nothing seemed out of place. Then something stirred at the edge of the crib. Whiskers. The cat was still, his ears alert, and his eyes seemed to scan the room in the dark. Sarah's breath caught as she watched him lift his head, his body tense. Whiskers had always been a bit of a night owl, prowling around the house after dark, but this was different. She could see it in the way he moved, the way his attention was focused entirely on something unseen. Then, with a sudden, swift motion, he jumped onto the crib railing. For a moment, he just watched Noah, as if making sure everything was fine. But then the camera caught it. The small, silent movement on the floor. The rat had appeared, crawling unnoticed into the nursery, a few feet from Noah's crib. Whiskers was already in motion, his body shifting as he leapt down, closing the distance between him and the rodent. His movements were quick, precise. The video cut out briefly as Whiskers pounced, and when it resumed, the rat lay motionless on the floor, its body a dark shape against the wood. The cat stood over it, his fur still bristling as he kept his eyes on it, making sure the danger was gone. He didn't leave Noah's side until he was sure. Sarah couldn't breathe as the footage played out. The moment was both surreal and stunning. Whiskers had done it. He had saved their son without anyone ever knowing. They had slept through it all, unaware that their cat had acted as Noah's protector, instinctively understanding the danger and doing something no one had ever expected. David leaned back, his hand on his forehead, processing what he had just seen. "I can't believe it," he whispered. "Whiskers, he saved him." Sarah and David sat in silence for a moment, the weight of what they had just witnessed sinking in. They couldn't speak. The video was still playing, repeating the scene of Whiskers' quiet, decisive action. The image of their cat, standing guard over their son, keeping the danger at bay, played over and over in Sarah's mind. It was hard to believe. She had always trusted Whiskers, but never in a million years had she imagined he would protect Noah in such a way. David finally broke the silence. "How do we even begin to explain this?" His voice was shaky, filled with a mix of awe and disbelief. "I don't know," Sarah replied, her voice softer than usual. "I mean, I know he's protective of Noah, but this is different. He actually saved him." There was an unspoken bond between Whiskers and Noah. Sarah had always noticed how the cat seemed to keep a close eye on the baby, often sleeping at the edge of his crib or curling up on the rug just a few feet away. But to think that Whiskers had been aware enough to sense danger, enough to act without hesitation, it was impossible to wrap her mind around it. The love and protection that animals felt for their families were often underestimated. She had always assumed that Whiskers' presence was just a comfort for Noah, not a safety measure. David ran a hand through his hair, still looking at the screen. "I don't even know how he knew. Cats are supposed to be hunters, but to recognize a threat like that, it's like he knew that was his job." Sarah nodded, her thoughts racing. The rat, though small, could have been a serious threat. It was a danger that could have gone unnoticed until it was too late. Whiskers had acted swiftly, as if he had known exactly what needed to be done. As the footage looped one more time, Sarah's eyes began to water. He didn't just chase it away, he made sure it couldn't hurt Noah. She had always believed that animals had an extraordinary sense of loyalty, but this went beyond instinct. This was love in its purest, most selfless form. David turned to her, a smile playing on his lips despite the seriousness of the moment. "We're lucky, Sarah, very lucky." They both sat back, watching the video one last time, both of them lost in the wonder of what their cat had done for their family. As the realization of what Whiskers had done sank deeper, Sarah and David knew they had to share the story. They couldn't keep something so incredible to themselves, not after everything their cat had done. Still, neither of them was sure how to begin. The footage was so clear, so undeniable, but could anyone else understand it the way they did? Could anyone else truly comprehend the depth of what they had just witnessed? The next morning, Sarah took a deep breath and posted the video online, unsure of how it would be received. She added a simple caption: "Our cat saved our baby. We're still in shock." The post was intended to be a quiet reflection, something to share with family and friends, but it quickly spiraled beyond their expectations. Within hours, people from across the world were watching the video. It went viral. Comments flooded in. Some were in awe, others were skeptical, but all of them were moved by what Whiskers had done. Sarah and David couldn't keep up with the messages, the interviews, the reporters calling for a chance to speak with them. It was as if the world had suddenly discovered something magical. The footage was shared across news outlets, social media platforms, and even in news segments around the world. The story was everywhere. In one comment, a mother shared how her dog had saved her child from a snake bite, her words reflecting the same kind of amazement Sarah was feeling. Another user commented on how often pets sensed danger before humans could, amazed at how Whiskers had reacted without hesitation. Despite the influx of attention, there was one moment that stood out. A message from an animal behaviorist reached Sarah's inbox. The expert explained how Whiskers' protective behavior wasn't a coincidence. Cats, while often seen as independent, had an incredible ability to sense and respond to changes in their environment. Instinctively, they could detect threats, and sometimes, as in Whiskers' case, they would act to protect the ones they loved. It wasn't just about feeding them or being near them. It was a bond that extended far deeper. Sarah read the message several times, the words sinking in. Whiskers had done more than protect Noah. He had acted on a deep, instinctual level, guided by something pure. In the midst of all the media buzz and attention, Sarah looked at Whiskers, curled up peacefully on the couch. She realized, with quiet awe, that sometimes love was not just shown through affection but through action. As the weeks passed, Sarah and David couldn't help but feel the weight of what Whiskers had done. Every time they looked at their cat, they were reminded not just of his love for their family, but of the extraordinary instincts that had driven him to act in that moment. Whiskers wasn't just a cat. He had become a symbol of devotion in their lives, and their gratitude for him deepened each day. But life had a way of moving forward. Noah grew, as babies do, becoming more active, more aware of his surroundings. The once peaceful nursery had turned into a place full of new sounds, gurgles, babbling, and occasionally a little bit of crying when he got frustrated with his toys. Whiskers, as ever, remained close by. He was no longer just a pet to them. He was an ever-present part of their family's fabric. Someone who had proven, beyond a doubt, that love could be shown in ways far beyond a simple gesture. One day, Sarah sat on the couch, watching Noah play with a rattle in the living room. Whiskers was sprawled out next to her, his paws tucked neatly under his chest. She reached down absent-mindedly to scratch behind his ears, and as she did, she thought back to the night of the incident. the footage they had shared with the world. There had been so many reactions, so many people marveling at what Whiskers had done, but to her it was simply another act of love, a love she had taken for granted until that fateful night. David had asked her once if she thought the attention would change Whiskers. Would he become aloof or less affectionate because of his newfound fame? But Sarah knew the answer to that. Whiskers had always been the same, quiet, independent, but fiercely protective when it mattered most. The only thing that had changed was their recognition of how deeply this little creature cared for them. The story of Whiskers' bravery didn't just stay within the walls of their home. It had sparked conversations across social media, on TV segments, and in coffee shops. People had been reminded of the bonds they shared with their animals, the unexpected ways pets could protect and care for their families. And for Sarah and David, it was a reminder that sometimes it was the quiet, unnoticed moments that held the most power. Whiskers wasn't just a cat. He was their protector, their friend, and their constant reminder that love, in any form, should never be underestimated. As time went on, the attention from the media slowly died down, but the impact of that night never left Sarah and David. They continued to share the story of Whiskers' heroism with their friends, family, and anyone who would listen. Each retelling was just as powerful as the first, and it never failed to bring a sense of warmth to their hearts. It wasn't just about the act itself anymore. It was about the deeper message behind it, the reminder that love isn't always loud and obvious, but sometimes it's quiet, subtle, and can come from the most unexpected places. Noah grew older, his laughter filling the house, his tiny hands reaching out to explore the world around him. And Whiskers remained by his side, as always. He'd sleep by the crib at night, keeping a silent watch over the child he had once protected. He wasn't just Noah's cat anymore. He had become a part of the family's legacy, a symbol of loyalty and love. Even though he hadn't needed to act again, there was something about the bond between them all that felt even stronger now. One evening, as Sarah and David watched Noah play in the living room, Whiskers padded over to them, his eyes calm but filled with affection. He jumped up onto the couch, settling beside them as if to say, "I'm still here. I'm still part of this." Sarah gently stroked his fur, her fingers brushing the scar on his ear, a mark from a past she would never forget. A tear welled up in her eye as she thought about how close they had come to losing Noah. In that one quiet moment, she realized something. Love doesn't always come with a dramatic gesture. It's shown in the quiet, everyday moments, like a cat curling up beside a baby to watch over him, or a parent saying a quiet thank you for the safety of their family. They had been lucky. Whiskers had saved Noah that night, but he had also shown them the power of love and loyalty, something that couldn't be captured in a single act. It was a love that had always been there, and now, with the world watching, they had seen it in its truest form. They didn't need the world to tell them how special Whiskers was. They knew. And every day, as they watched him with Noah, they were reminded that sometimes the greatest heroes don't come in capes. They come in fur. Some heroes don't wear capes. Some have whiskers, tails, and an unshakable sense of loyalty. Whiskers didn't act because he was trained to. He acted out of love, out of a bond that couldn't be explained. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to appreciate the animals in your life. Love them, protect them, and never underestimate the instincts they have. Because sometimes the ones watching over us aren't the ones we expect. They're the ones with paws curled up beside us, silently keeping us safe.